In this video, we're going to take a look at a magenta ink by Noodler's their Omaha. Now, as always, there's timestamps down below so you can skip around, but if you've got the time, I'd appreciate you checking out the entire video. And if you're interested in seeing other magenta inks, then down in the description is a link to that playlist. I'm an ink guy, and let's get into the first writing sample done on 90 GSM Clairfontaine. You see, I almost messed up my own line there. No bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen. There is some shading coming through in the Omaha of the stub. There is no shading in the extra fine, but there is some shading coming through in the medium. Now, in general, we have all the same tone. The extra fine took 11 seconds to dry, and the medium took 17. The scrubby for both do show a little bit of color variation. I correct myself on the extra fine. I'm seeing the shading here in lazy and brown going dark to light. So in general, we have decent shading. The smear test says you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. To have a range of experience with this ink, all of the writing samples are done with a Jinhao 159 with a 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a medium, and a Jinhao X750 with an extra fine. Then a Lamy Safari with a fine nib was inked up, used for a day, and used to take the notes for this video. The next writing sample is done on 52 GSM Tomoe River. No bleeding, minor ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen. We get shading in the stub, shading in the extra fine, some shading on over and in brown, but not a whole lot in the medium. The extra fine's lighter than the stub, while the medium is by far the darkest tone on the page. The extra fine took 16 seconds to dry, and the medium took 36 seconds to dry. The scrubby for both do show a tiny bit of color variation, but it's better in the extra fine in the writing in general. The smear test says you could not recover if you smeared while you were writing. I agree with Vita. There's a lot to learn by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. A line of ink is put down, and then it's put in the water for 10 to 15 seconds. And you see that magenta tone at the bottom that's immediately forming a line and pushing not very far up and gathering. And then we get this red, but on the left part of that red, you see a little bit of an orange mixed in. So there's really 3 different dyes being used here. Now the one on the right that's let dry for 10 minutes before it's put into water, we see that magenta on the bottom is really forming a line showing how permanent this ink is going to become, or we suspect. We see that red, but we even see a few streaks of that orange. So it's probably going to be messy, but a little resistant. The next writing sample is done on 80 GSM Rhodia dot pad. No bleeding, no ghosting. We get no feather, spread, halo sheen. We get shading in the stub, shading in the extra fine, no shading in the medium. The medium's by far the darkest tone on the page. Extra fine's lighter than the stub. The extra fine took 10 seconds to dry, while the medium took 15. The extra fine and the medium, far left to far right, show color variation, much more in the extra fine than the medium. And we really didn't get it in the writing for the medium though. And the smear test you could probably recover if you smeared while you were writing. Resistance tests are done to see how this ink could be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it may be to clean from your pen. The smear is allowed to dry for 3 days before testing it. Looking at the highlighter, you see the lowercase h, that red part from the chromatography definitely moved and made it blurry. I would not use it in a note-taking situation. Water is moving barely any of this ink off the paper, and pen flush is barely doing anything more than that. In fact, 1/3 bleach solution is barely doing anything more than the pen flush. Now, it took pen flush quite a bit of work to get this out of my pen. I did get it entirely with pen flush, but I had to be persistent to get it entirely out of the converter. The next writing sample is done in a composition notebook like you would have used in your science lab class. We have no bleeding, but very little ghosting. No feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade in the medium, light shading in the extra fine. The extra fine only took 5 seconds to dry. It is a lot lighter than the medium. Scrubby shows some color variation, and we do get little spots of it in the writing. And the smear test, you could recover if you smeared while you were writing. For the inks tested, the average viscosity was 2.5, and the realm of normal was 2.1 to 2.9. Noodler's Omaha had a viscosity of 1.6, so it's a wet ink. The next writing sample is done on 20-pound copy paper. Now there's a lot of bleeding going on, but none of this touched the page underneath, but all of it means you can't use the back of the page because of its extreme amount of ghosting. There is feather on the medium, and there is some feather on the extra fine. There's spread on the medium to about a broad, maybe a little bit more, and the spread on the extra fine to about a fine medium. The extra fine's a lot lighter than the stub. There's no halo sheen. There is no shade. It took 1 second to dry. The scrubby shows some color variation. We didn't get any. And the smear test, you can't smear it, so don't worry about it. For the inks tested, the average dry time was 17 seconds, and the realm of normal was 13 to 21 seconds. Noodler's Omaha had an average dry time of 18 seconds, so it's still normal. The last writing sample is done on 28-pound copy paper. We do have some spots where it came through a bit heavy right here, and quite a bit with the medium at the top. Now, to be fair, none of this touches the page underneath. I don't see any of this stopping somebody from using the back of the page. We do have feathering in the medium. We do have some feathering in the extra fine. We have no spread in either, no halo, no sheen. The extra fine is showing some shade in brown and in quick, but the medium shows none. The extra fine's a lot lighter than the medium is, and it only took 1 second for the extra fine to dry. The scrubby shows some color variation, which it did have, and the smear test, you can't smear it, so you're not worried about it. Instead of finding inks that look like Noodler's Omaha, I'd prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. I decided to go with a purple ink by KWZ, their Iron Gall Violet number 3. Now, I saw this on the page as the idea of them looking similar but different. Different enough that I would not confuse them with each other. If you'd prefer a different complement color, then down in the description are links to those playlists. So what do I think of Noodler's Omaha? I actually picked this ink up because I've only ever seen it on eBay, and I heard rumors of knockoff Noodler's inks. And it made me wonder if this is really a Noodler's ink. I tried emailing Nathan, but I haven't had any kind of response. So if you know, please let me know, is this a knockoff Noodler's or is this the real McCoy? So what nib and pen are going to give the best writing experience with this ink? A medium flow fine puts a nice tone down and gives some shading, but a medium flow medium doesn't. So while I think it looks good in both of those, it's a matter of if you'd prefer the shading or not. Now, it's funny because in all of the red-hued stuff, and so the red-leaning magentas, I don't tend to prefer the shading, so I would go with the medium flow medium. I hope you got something out of this video, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at Sailor Kobe number 44, the number I wore for hockey in college.